Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And this is one of our biggest episodes of the year as we reveal our preseason top 50 prospects for the Orioles farm system. We're going to bring that to you, player 1 through 50 on this episode. Now, if you're a member of our Patreon community, you've had these breakdowns in daily installments over about the last 6 weeks or so, but now we're going to break them down fully on this episode. And speaking of our Patreon community, even though the countdown is over, we continue to see new patrons join. And to shout out our newest members, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, I would like to welcome 4 more patrons into the fold, into the system. It's been a constant influx of talent this offseason. No, honestly, before I get into the names, genuinely overwhelmed and thrilled to see so many people sign up over the offseason. And hopefully we're all in for a great 2026 season together. And genuinely appreciate it. So shout out to Scott Swatala, who joined at the AA level, David Bernstein, or Berenstein, is it Berenstein Bears? Berenstein Bears? Who joined at low A level, Jeff Hartle, who joined at the AA level, and Josh Arnold all the way up to AAA. So must have been an independent league signing, liked what we saw, gets an invite to spring training. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for everyone who, again, signed up this offseason.
Now, as I mentioned in the intro, this is one of our biggest shows of the year. You go back to when this podcast started in 2020. Back then we only did a top 30, but we've had some form of preseason top prospect lists throughout the 6 years we've been doing this show. And our system for doing it has been the same the whole time. But in case you're new or you need a reminder of that, the way we do this is that the 3 of us make our own individual top 50 lists. Those go to Bob, who then puts them into an aggregate that produces the final top 50, which is what we're going to show you tonight. And along the way, we're going to talk about some of the differences on our list as appropriate. But when you look at the top 10 in the system, we were pretty much in agreement on who those top 10 players were. And I think it will come as a little surprise that number 1 on the list is catcher Samuel Basallo. Basallo considered a consensus top 10 prospect in the game right now. He is followed by Dylan Beavers, who, like Basallo, had an impressive late season run in the majors last year, has also received acknowledgement on a few top 100 lists. Following them at number 3 is right-handed pitcher Trey Gibson, again, someone who has shown up on a couple of top 100 lists this offseason. Ike Irish, the Orioles' first-round pick in last year's draft, comes in 4th, followed by 2025 draftee Vahiva Aloy at 5th. Left-hander Luis De Leon, one of the better breakout stories of the last year in the Orioles farm system, is 6th. Nate George, another big breakout over the past year, comes in 7th. He is followed by Enrique Bradfield Jr. at 8, Levi Wells at 9, and Esteban Mejia at 10. So we round out the top 10 with 2 hard-throwing right-handers at different stages of their careers, with Wells on the doorsteps of the majors, likely heading back to Norfolk to begin next season, while Mejia is staring down his first full season in the minors, which we expect will begin at Delmarva. So when you look at the 10 players we have here, I don't think it really comes as a surprise. But Nick, I'll start with you here. Your thoughts on this group 1 through 10?
This was definitely the easy part of the list. Felt like around 20 through 50 was the most difficult I think I've had in the last couple of years, but for good reasons, not bad reasons. But yeah, looking at this top 10, it's technically Beavers and Basallo being on there, but they shouldn't be on there for too long. And then we'll probably most likely see Trey Gibson there as the number 1 overall prospect in the system, which is still just mind-blowing considering where he's coming from and his history. But yeah, love to see the high upside picks here with Ike Irish and Vahiva Aloy. I think we touched on this in the Patreon episode when looking at just the top 5. Maybe if you want to have Aloy above Irish, I think that's justifiable as well, considering Aloy's, the premier defender out there at the shortstop position. But I like this top 10 how it is. And you look at, it's not just first-round picks there, and it's not just the high-dollar international signee like Samuel Basallo, but it's also Luis De Leon, who signed for $30,000. It's Nate George, who was 16th round draft pick. It's Levi Wells, who was still a 4th round draft pick, but a guy who's kind of been overlooked even during his college days, going from Big 12 down to the Sun Belt, and then the injury his first year. I like the way this top 10 list shakes out, and there's still some guys who, you look at the ceiling with these guys, especially Luis De Leon, Nate George. I mean, these guys are just starting to tap into what we could potentially see with those two guys. This is where you're going to see a lot of fun intrigue in 2026, I think.
Yeah, I love the top 10. I think we've talked about it a lot this offseason, obviously with the top 50 countdown, and then that last top five episode for patrons. But the top two are in a tier of their own, and they'll be off the list by the second week of the season, pretty much. And then it gets really interesting. I feel like the only one of the top 10 who hasn't shown up in any top 100 lists that I've seen is Levi Wells, and I would say he's probably one of the most underrated players in the Orioles organization right now. Maybe not as much after his spring debut, and his stuff looked pretty good. Actually, a lot of the young pitchers have looked really good, and relief options early in spring, but that's a topic for another day. I just think we've talked about it a lot, the depth of the system. It's the depth at the top, too, because I feel like you could shuffle this top 10 outside of the top two in Basayo and Beavers, and I couldn't find a huge fault with any way it turned out. I think there's going to be a lot of, what is the saying, the wheat separating from the chaff in the first half of 2026. I feel like it might be a little more clear as the season goes on, but right now, I mean, it's 3 through 50 is not quite just randomize it, but it's a big lump of really talented players that if their development hits the right notes, they can soar up this list and find a nice, cozy spot at the top of the list.
You're both right. It was really easy to figure out the top two on this list, Basayo and Beaver. So it's lock it down, very easy picks. But when you get beyond that, it gets interesting because I do think that if you wanted to go on ceiling, you could argue that Nate George, Esteban Mejia, or Luis De Leon belongs at number 3. If you wanted to go on floor, you could argue that that's the decision we made with Trey Gibson, or you could go with Ike Iris because of the bat. And like Nick said, you could easily justify Aloy over Iris. I had Iris ahead of Aloy on my personal list because I do feel comfortable about the hit tool, even though I don't think that the Orioles should develop him as a catcher, but I'm not going to let that affect my judgment of him as a prospect. I'm just going to hope that eventually works itself out down the line, that either he develops into a capable defender behind the plate with a good bat, or that the Orioles realize before they've stalled his development for too long that it's not going to work behind the plate. It's time to move him to the outfield. But either way, I feel pretty comfortable about the hit tool. And with Aloy, if he can go to Frederick this year and keep the strikeout rate, let's say in the 22, maybe the 20 to 22% range, with a good walk rate and some power, I think it's going to bode well for how he's going to do at the higher levels. So swing and miss might always be part of his game, but he does enough other things well that you can feel comfortable about him as a prospect.
Just a couple of notes. Some of these we mentioned in last week on the Patreon episode, and just throw it out there for everybody because I think it's fun context for some of these guys. And especially just some other notes about Levi Wells here. But first, at the top there is Samuel Basayo. I mentioned this last week. To put it into perspective, Fangraphs has him at a 65 overall prospect. Over the last 5 years, the only other 65 or higher ranked prospects on Fangraphs list have been Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, a lot of Orioles, Julio Rodriguez, Bobby Witt, Corbin Carroll, Wyatt Langford, James Wood, Paul Skeens, Jackson Churio, and Roki Sasaki. So and Samuel Basayo is just a couple of months, 2-3 months older than a lot of the bats that are going to be drafted in the first round of this year's MLB draft. So, and he's already got the contract extension in hand and has made his major league debut. So I think if there's any concern about his MLB numbers last year, I have zero. He's starting to, looks like he's settling in spring a little bit this year, putting up some 108s, 109s, some nice hard hit balls as well that are landing for base hits, not just, line outs and stuff. But I wanted to talk about Levi Wells again, just because I do like that he's snuck in here to our top 10 at number 9. I'll pull up Jeff Ponce's article real quick, because to put Wells' stuff into perspective, and this is from Jeff Wrights over at Baseball America, looking at Wells' fastball specifically, only 5 pitches pitchers in minor league baseball threw a fastball that sat 96.5 miles per hour or higher, touched 100 or higher, had 17 inches or more of induced vertical break, and produced a spin rate north of 2,500. And Wells' fastball is unique from those other fastballs because he has the flattest vertical attack angle. So it is a unicorn-esque fastball there. And even the curveball, Jeff also says, is a rare offering from Levi Wells, one of only 6 curveballs in minor league baseball to sit 81.5 miles per hour higher with a spin rate north of 2,900 RPMs, 10 plus inches of horizontal movement. And what helps Wells' fastball distinguish from the crowd is that he has fantastic command of the pitch. So some truly outlier stuff there for Levi Wells. We'll see what role he ultimately lands in. But yeah, I love the his fiery combativeness on the mound. I think that will lend well to a potential bullpen role. But yeah, I'm not counting him out of a rotation spot right now, especially at least to begin the year. And then with one note on Enrique Bradfield real quick. Can't mention Enrique Bradfield without the speed and defense, but I think his AAA performance overshadows what he did in AA last year. He had a 125 WRC plus in AA last year. So I'm very anxious to see what he does when he gets back to AAA. He impacts the game, he just does it in a way that the modern game doesn't really appreciate. And so I'm excited to hopefully see him tap into that a little bit more in AAA this year when he gets back and hopefully reach the big leagues at some point this year.
Good stuff. Shout out to Jeff Ponce, former guest of the show, and genuinely, I think one of the best writers when it comes to prospects in general out there on the internet. So good stuff there. Levi Wells, yeah, like I said, he looked phenomenal in his spring debut. He looked great last spring. He looked great all last year in the minor leagues. I do love that he's in our top 10 because I do think he's one of the more underrated players in the system. Trey Gibson, the death ball. We got to see that on full display in his spring debut, and if he can command it the way he did the first time out, and he went 3 innings, struck out, I can't remember the exact line, but that death ball was absurd. Talk about unicorn pitches. I don't know if anyone is throwing the pitch the way he does. We've always heard great feel for spin. Well, it shows now that we have the data on him, and he's had an off season to adjust. It just firms what we made this list at the start of the offseason. Or the end of the year, not the start of the offseason, end of this calendar year that just passed. And since then, it's, my opinion's only cemented that he's the best pitching prospect in the system. Maybe doesn't have the best fastball. Maybe he doesn't have the best, I don't know, any X subject, but he just put it all together. And I think he's like a mid to maybe a number 2 starter in the big leagues. If he can put it all together to control his off-speed stuff the way he does, it's phenomenal. And Nestor Herman, he had 23 IVB on his fastball today in spring training as we're recording this, and he walked the first 2 batters he faced. I'm sure he was nervous, first time ever in a big league spring training game, but then was nails, lights out, struck out 4 batters in his 2 innings of work, 2.1 innings. So yeah, just continuing to heap praise on this top 10.
That's a great point about Gibson, which is I don't think the depth of his pitch mix has really been fully appreciated yet, at least nationally. Some of that probably is because his numbers at AAA weren't that good, and that was the first time that there was a lot of publicly available data about his pitches. But that was such a small sample size at the end of the year that I'm not really concerned about it. You know, if you want to look at pitches across the board, who has a better fastball, Esteban Mejia or Trey Gibson? You're probably going to take Esteban Mejia. Luis De Leon's changeup is a pitch we've talked about a lot over the years. That is very good. But Gibson's death ball, I can honestly sit here and say there's not another pitch like it in the organization. And I don't know that's going to end up being the card-carrying pitch for him, that like he's ahead in the count and he drops 1 or 2 of those in and the at-bat's over. But it has really helped him come a long way from a guy that was an undrafted free agent just a couple of years ago that's pushed through the minors. He started last year in high A, ended up pitching at 3 levels, which for an Orioles pitching prospect prior to last year was pretty much unheard of.
There's so much emphasis on his four-seam fastball, and of course we brought that up a lot as well over the last few weeks. But then I don't remember his exact quote after he came out of that spring game, and it was he just didn't feel it. Like he wasn't feeling the four-seamer. So I don't think he threw a single one in the 3 innings of work he did the other day. Still went, I mean, yeah, he wasn't facing, did he go up against the Yankees or whatever team he went up to? He wasn't facing regulars of their lineup, but still, he carved through that lineup pretty effectively without the four-seam fastball. And I think you guys brought this up when we talked about him previously as well. Having Chris Bassett there in that major league bullpen or major league rotation, Gibson's going to be able to work with him, pick his brain hopefully a little bit, or just watch how he operates up close and personal in spring training. And I think that's going to be a benefit to Gibson as well. It's like, we kind of talked about what does the pitch mix look like going into 2026? Does he pare it down a little bit more or what happens? I think he's going to keep this pretty wide arsenal. And it's just, if one of his pitches, he just doesn't have a feel for it when he's warming up in the bullpen, all right, don't use it that day. He's got 7 other pitches he can go to, see how they play. I think that was a really good sign to see.
Yeah, it was all sinker, and it was pretty effective. I mean, he didn't throw a ton, but yeah, that's one of the benefits of having that wide arsenal is, hey, in warm-ups, I was not feeling this pitch. I don't even need to throw it today because I've got 5 other ones that I can go to. And yeah, I think my favorite pitch sequence of this entire spring training so far, I know it's only been like a week and a half, but is when Gibson went sweeper, death ball sweeper for a strikeout. That was like pretty sweet.
Absolutely. We'll go now into the next part of the list, 11 through 20, and this is going to be a pretty deep run on pitching right here, but it's not without its share of intriguing position players, including our 11th ranked prospect, Aaron Estrada, coming off the best season of his professional career, and he's made quite a good impression so far in the early stages of Orioles camp. Nestor Herman follows him at 12th. Best Boston Bateman, a tall left-hander, at number 13. He was acquired from the Padres as part of the Ryan O'Hearn, Ramon Laureano trade at the deadline last year. He's followed by another big left-hander in Joseph Giroux, a pick by the Orioles out of Michigan State in last year's draft. Deron Watts-Brown, who was acquired from the Blue Jays as part of the Sir Anthony Dominguez trade, a right-hander with a good pitch mix, comes in at number 15. He's followed by J.T. Quinn, who was drafted out of Georgia last year and seems to be a guy that, at least as far as the three of us are concerned, could be in line for a big breakout in 2026. Braxton Bragg, we might not see him pitch at all this year after he underwent Tommy John surgery in the second half of the 2025 season, but we like the ceiling enough that he's up at number 17. Jordan Sanchez, who had a good late season cameo at Delmarva, comes in at number 18. He's followed by a fellow intriguing outfielder in Tomas Sosa at 19, and then Cameron Weston at number 20. And if we're going to talk about guys that have made a good impression in the early stages of camp, Cameron Weston is a guy that we're probably going to highlight here tonight. But let's just start going back to Nick here with our thoughts on this group as a whole.
This is where you're going to see some guys, I think, truly break out. And it's going to be fun to see some of their rise. Starting there with the guy pictured in Aaron Estrada, someone we've talked a lot about over the last few weeks. He's added strength. He's bulked up. He's got more bat speed. It's 19 home runs the last 2 years. It was 9 in 2024. He hit 10 last season, got up to Double-A, and was probably put up some of his best performances in Double-A as, a 20-year-old at the end of the year. But it's good contact. It's the ability to steal bases with the growing power. And even if it's not like over-the-fence power, that it's not translating to 15 to 20 home runs a year, he's able to impact the ball in a pretty notable way. First, he's 5'8". That's what he's listed as. We'll see. Who knows what the actual height there is, but if he's around that 5'8" range, to be able to put up the exit velos that he does, that's, again, if it doesn't result in over the fence power, he'll get some out, but still, he's going to be able to drive the balls into the gaps and use his speed to turn singles into doubles into triples. I think one thing a lot of us will be focusing on this year is the defense. Now that we've seen the bat take such a big step forward, it's, all right, where does he fit in defensively? At the next level is a big question, but the bat came around in a major way last year, which was really fun to see. And yeah, just the arms right here, it's who's going to break out. Is it going to be Nestor Herman, who pitched very well, as Bob said? The first 2 batters was 2 walks, and I was at my kitchen counter watching that part of the game. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Anthony Nunez just came out and shoved once again, and here comes Nestor Herman. All right, he's throwing 92, and walking the first 2 guys. I got a little nervous, but he turned it up. Ended up throwing 2 scoreless, 8 or 9 whiffs, a couple strikeouts. Had a good performance today. Showed off his potential. The breaking balls were especially impressive. I think, in this first outing. Boston Bateman, it's like he was a 19-year-old kid last year. And we've talked about maybe he didn't have, like, the stuff didn't have, like, that bite that we wanted to see. But I think you're going to see more velo. I think you're going to see a more defined pitch mix this year. And if it takes him a little longer, it takes him a little longer. But there's not many 6'8" lefties with his kind of pitch mix and profile. So I think he's going to be a fun project to watch this year. And a couple of the draft picks there that we've talked a lot about, Giro and Quinn. I mean, these guys are, Quinn's more the unknown because he's had so many like injuries and, again, non-elbow, non-shoulder injuries. I want to emphasize that. When he was at Ole Miss and then just really wasn't used a ton at Georgia. But that fastball, I think that's a potential like plus fastball. And he's a 6'6" guy with a very over-the-top delivery. He's got a firm base to build off of. Giro's got the command and that changeup. It's this pitching in this group is going to be what I'm going to be like glued to every single night this year.
Estrada, for me, with the bullet, is the star of this group. I have him 6 overall on my list because I believe that the breakout has arrived. It is here. I think he led all players in yesterday's game in exit velocity with 107.6 in his like pinch hit appearance or what have you. I think the power will be there. Yeah, like you said, it might not be a ton of over the wall, over the fence home run power, but he's hitting the ball very hard all over the field. If he can elevate enough, he could be a guy that hits 20-plus home runs a year. I mean, he's only going to he just turned 21 last month. So Tomas Sosa also hit 107 today. In today's game, it's just, you're starting to see the best parts of this system, especially the past year or two, is the international position prospects and pitching prospects. But the Tomas Sosa's, the Samuel Basallos, Aaron Estrada's, you're starting to see that spark up and get to the top of these lists. And also the pitching. 7 out of the 10 pitchers in this group, or 7 out of the 10 players in this group are pitchers. And the pitching is in safe hands. I know this season, present day, like we wanted that ace. We wanted, to do a little bit better than the Orioles ultimately did, even though they went with the depth. But just the stockpile of arms at the AAA to AA level is insane, and we're not even talking about guys like Bateman, Giroux, Quinn, who are going to be in the A-ball level this year, and I think they have huge potential as well. But even if it's just as a lot of these guys turning into relievers, ultimately, I think that's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be a much more high-octane relief corps starting in 2026 than we've seen in the past couple of years. It's very exciting, and I do want to shout out Cameron Weston, who had a fantastic spring debut, 2 innings, 4 strikeouts. The stuff plus numbers aren't as eye-popping as a lot of the other guys, but I think he threw 7 pitches out of the 29 pitches he threw. There's 7 different pitches, and the slider was the only one that had a stuff plus over 100. But if you can sequence, if you can locate, and you have that much of an arsenal, kitchen sink reliever, I think, is going to be very valuable and a guy that can go multiple innings. So, yeah, I'm thrilled with this part of the list.
Yeah, with Estrada, he came very close to being in my top 10. I actually had him 12th, but to be honest with you, that 10 through 12 range for me, you could have put those players in any order and justified it. The question that I have with him is defensively, where is he going to end up? I think that's still one that really has not been answered. Ideally, for me, he becomes an above-average second baseman defensively because I do think that the bat's for real. And maybe he's not going to hit 20 home runs a season in the majors, but if he has that good gap power with the ability to hit the ball as hard as he does, he's going to hit enough to be at least a solid contributor in the majors. And then with Boston Bateman, I just wanted to touch on him for a moment because I did his individual episode in our Patreon countdown. And what jumped out at me and what I said in that episode was that Bateman's not the typical tall, left-handed 20-year-old pitching prospect where, okay, they're like 6'5", 170, 180 pounds. Are they going to get stronger? Is that going to lead to more velo? Bateman's kind of already physically maxed out. But it does feel like there is a little bit more left in the tank velocity-wise, even if we don't see it inning over inning in each start. And there's a broad pitch mix there with a lot of pitches that have not been refined yet, but I know that John Mioli wrote at the banner after the trade last year. I think it was the slider was a pitch that had really been a big point of emphasis for him, even during his time in the Padres system. So if he has had a chance this offseason to work with the Orioles and really make the adjustments that he needs to make, he could be a guy that we're looking at in the second half. And even if that hitter-friendly confine in Frederick has inflated his ERA a little bit, we're seeing the strikeouts come up. We're seeing him do a better job of attacking hitters when he's ahead in the count. I think you can feel pretty good about where he is in his development.
Yeah, that with Bateman and then with Jira being 6'7", the short guy among these two, already having that command and that changeup, and just me being pitching pilled, is why I have Estrada right behind those two guys on my personal list, and I think I am the lowest. I have all three of ours pulled up here. I'm the low guy on him at 14, but it's just, yeah. If Jiro didn't have the command that he did, I'd probably move Estrada up a bump. But another arm there at Braxton Bragg, you said we probably don't see him this year, and I think if we do, it might be, a couple innings at the end of the year. He could be an AFL candidate next year, right? So maybe he builds up a little bit more in the Arizona Fall League before the Orioles make their decision to 40-man him or not. I think you've got to, unless you trade him. And if you trade him, you're going to be trading him at his lowest value. If he's healthy last year and doesn't have TJ surgery, looking at him, I'm probably slotting him like number 6 in this system, to be honest, maybe. He's like top 8 at worst, I think, if he has a healthy year last year.
Unquestionably. Yeah, I think he'd be in the argument with Gibson and De Leon in the way he ended the year for best pitching prospect in the system. And I think he'd be making the case to be the first guy to get the call in 2026 if he had stayed healthy and been active this spring training. And yeah, we can't forget about how good he really was before he went down with injury. And hopefully, if they like his recovery and he's picking right back up where he left off, yeah, I mean, he is a high, middle of the rotation starter potentially, or a late inning reliever, whatever you want to do with him. He's got the arm talent to be a top 10 player in the system for sure.
Before we move on, I do want to go back to Cameron Weston for a moment, and Bob just kind of rattled off what we saw in his spring debut, and it was a good pitch mix. And Nick, as you put over our X, I thought it was perfect that StatCast didn't even know what Cameron Weston was throwing on a few of those pitches. So that gives you a sense of what you're looking at. And we had a discussion a few times leading up to the deadline to protect players from the Rule 5 draft. What do you do with Cameron Weston? Because he's the only pitcher that's in the mix that is starting at the high levels of the minor leagues. So that's possible, valuable starting pitching depth for you, even if he's the guy that you put on the Norfolk Shuttle all year. But the stuff doesn't always look like a typical big league starter, particularly the fastball. I know I've always been in the camp that if you can throw as many pitches for strikes as Weston does, and you can deceive hitters the way you do, that you're going to have some big league role. But I think that it is something we want to see from him this year, which is, can he move beyond, okay, this is just a pitcher who gets by with deception, into really being in the conversation for an extended run in the big leagues this year?
I just view him, like you guys said, this relief role. Like I just imagine like Kyle Bradish gets the start, right? He's a tall, over-the-top delivery, power arm. He comes in, he gets through the 5th, he gets into the 6th, he gets one out, maybe he walks a guy, he gives up a hit, there's some traffic, you decide to pull him. You bring in a Cameron Weston who's like lowered his arm slot, I believe, like every year the last couple of years, and you don't know what he's going to throw. He's coming from a completely different angle. It's a completely different look. Can he come in, get the ground ball, get the double play, get out of the inning? Or there's 2 outs, get the infield pop fly, or a lazy hanger into the outfield, get out of the inning, job well done. Can he be that type of guy? I think he can. I just think that look. And when hitters do make contact against his stuff in AAA last year, it wasn't good contact. He was 82nd percentile in barrel rate and 96th percentile in hard hit rate. So it wasn't hard contact. He produces a decent number of ground balls as well. I think like this change of pace reliever could be a role for him. And also, he pitched 109 innings in 2024 and 135 innings last year in AAA. So he's also got that length to where if you need an emergency start, Cameron Weston can come up and can he give you, say, hey, we need you to go like 5 innings at least tonight, 6 innings if possible. He could be a guy that could potentially go out there and make starts like that for you. But yeah, I think he could have a little bit more success, though, as that kind of change of pace just a weird look relief option. You don't give guys, opposing hitters, a chance to, they're not chasing. I think that was a big issue in AAA. Guys weren't chasing his stuff, so he wasn't getting the whiffs, and he was walking more guys. Major league hitters definitely aren't going to chase this stuff, but they're not going to have a chance to settle in against this stuff if they only see him one time.
Yeah, it's very key that he gets back to having the command that he showed before 2025. And like we've talked about why the command numbers maybe weren't quite as bad as they look on surface level numbers. But yeah, if he can command it just half a touch better, his stuff is going to work that much more, get the weak contact. He's got a good slider. He's got a weird, good changeup that I think Stuff Plus numbers aren't doing justice. Yeah, big fan of Weston. I'm glad that gamble in the Rule 5 draft paid off. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the gamble on Carter Baumler is going to pay off because he is showing out in Texas. It's still very early, but we'll see. I'm happy for the guy. Glad he's doing well over there in spring training. But yeah, I'm happy that Weston stuck around, and I think he's going to play a pretty key role over the next few years.
We'll move on now to the next part of the list, and this is where, again, I think you see kind of an intriguing mix of some pitching prospects, but then a few hitters mix in as well, and some younger guys that we're hoping to get a little bit more of a look at this year, starting with number 21 on our list, and that is shortstop Wilfrey De La Cruz. He was acquired from the Cubs as part of the Andrew Kittredge trade in July. He's followed by Ethan Anderson at 22nd, Steven Martinez 23rd, Anthony Nunez 24th, Joshua Lorenzo at 25, followed by Creed Willems, the catcher, at number 26. Reed Trimble breaking out in really his first healthy season, or healthy-ish season, of his professional career, earning a spot on the Orioles 40-man roster this offseason and being named the 27th ranked prospect on our list. Tyson Neighbors, who was part of that deadline deal with the Padres, comes in at 28th, one of the more intriguing pure relief prospects alongside Nunez in the Orioles farm system. Jose Luis Acevedo, who received the largest signing bonus of any player in the Orioles' January 2026 international free agent class, comes in at 29. And then at number 30, Blake Money, a guy that we have talked about a lot since the second half of last season, and someone that the three of us, in particular Nick and I, are really starting to warm up to as a really intriguing arm in this farm system. So this is where I think it's a kind of a wide mixture of prospects where you have some guys that are close to the majors but have pretty clearly defined roles in Nunez and Neighbors, and then someone in De La Cruz who feels like a true wild card at this point. And from the limited sample we saw of him in the Cubs system and then in the Orioles last year in the Dominican Summer League, one thing we know for sure, he can draw a lot of walks.
Yeah, I'll just take the whole, this section, the international hitting side of it, is going to be super intriguing this year. There is definitely a very diverse group of prospects in this range, which is where we start getting a little bit more interesting. But yeah, Wilfrey De La Cruz does not turn 19 until the end of the 2026 season. And last year he put up an 856 OPS in the Dominican Summer League, a 27% walk rate, as Zach hinted at there last year between the Cubs and the Orioles. And I think it was Ben Badler at Baseball America noted at the end of the year that there was a lot less swing and miss that I think even he projected for Wilfrey De La Cruz early on, which was a good sign. The guy signed for $2.1 million and was like the crown jewel of the Chicago Cubs international signing class last year. Orioles get him for Andrew Kittredge, and then they also get Andrew Kittredge back. So fantastic deal there. I'm excited to see what he does, and given his success early on and strong eye at the plate, good bat to ball there, I wouldn't be shocked if we see him in Delmarva sooner rather than later, especially given how aggressive the Orioles have been in some of with their international bats of note. Steven Martinez was one of those guys, number 23 there. Look, the numbers are putrid. They're not easy to look at all, but he does not turn 18 until August of this year, which is mind-blowing. So he was pushed to Delmarva at the age of 17. He only played in 25 games. Yeah, the numbers are going to look like complete crap, and they do. But he's 6'4". He's got a ton of room to fill out physically. And I think it was an Eric Longenhagen's note, either Eric Longenhagen or Baseball America's note, either one, but noted that I think last year as a 17-year-old, so the age of a high school junior, he was putting up some of the best hard hit rates in the entire organization. So we'll see what he does this year. And then Joshua Lorenzo being the other international bat here in this group. Jose Luis Acevedo as well, but we'll see what he looks like this year. It's his first year. But Lorenzo, we've talked a lot about him before, about that injury when he came stateside. He suffers with the ankle or knee injury, but lower body injury, we'll keep it vague. And I think that really hindered his development early on. Last year, again, pushed up to Delmarva at the age of 18. And yeah, he struggled to catch on, but he had that one just monster home run. It's good bat speed. It's good power. I'm pretty intrigued to see what he does his second turn in Delmarva. If Lorenzo and Martinez hit, Martinez is always going to strike out a lot. That's always going to be part of his game. But if they start hitting, connecting, that's going to be a pretty unreal 1-2 punch down there in Delmarva.
We've said it so many times, but it just speaks so loudly that the Orioles love Steven Martinez, that they handled him the way they did last year, and the fact that I cannot believe that he won't turn 18 until that long into the season. But to push him, you don't do that unless you're really high on the skills and you believe that the absolute failure that they will and did go through is only going to be good for them. And that is not every player that's getting that. There's guys that we like that are repeating DSL, and it's like they're 18 now, and they're okay. They're coming along in the DSL in their second year. Well, Steve Martinez is out here 17 years old, striking out 50% of the time in Delmarva. But, like you said, hitting the ball so hard at such a young age, and just sky's the limit. Obviously, the floor is also the limit, but what did Baseball America say about Esteban Mejia? I think the same could be true about Steve Martinez, that the ceiling is the skyline. Like, there's no foreseeable top end. If he comes back out early this season and has, like, noticeable improvements, that's like he's jumping into my top 15, top 20 pretty quickly here. If he can do something like that. Yeah, I love these young international prospects. It's kind of funny that Acevedo precedes money. He got all the money this offseason, this international signing period. But yeah, it's a fun group. And Reed Trimble, he's out here. He's doing a good job in spring. He's already stolen a base. Didn't get caught stealing. Still has never got caught stealing as a professional. Has a few hits. Anthony Nunez, I already want to move up my list because I more and more firmly believe that he's going to be a starting pitcher before his career is over. I think he could break camp with the Orioles out of the bullpen this year. His stuff is nasty, but he's got 4 or 5 legit pitches. If he comes out and has a great year out of the bullpen this year, I would not be surprised at all if he's converted to a starter as soon as next year. I mean, Nunez is really going to – it'll be interesting to see where he lands in our first update come May 1st or what have you.
Can I just say to that point, I've thought about that too, and it does make a lot of sense. But the more you watch of him, I have a hard time wanting to go there. And I'm just thinking, like, we don't know that Felix Bautista is ever going to pitch again in an Orioles uniform. You can be optimistic. For those of you that are, I salute you. It's hard for me to be optimistic about Felix Bautista ever being Felix Bautista again. I hope and pray for it, but it's going to be tough. Helsley was a 1-year deal. If he has a good year, it was a 1 year and an opt-out or something, he could be gone if he has a really good year. Go get that money. Like, after what we're watching Chase McDermott do this spring, which we'll get to in a minute, but Nunez, like, just, my God, like, I don't know. That guy could just be a weapon out of the bullpen and a guy you feel comfortable with putting in high leverage innings. Or as Eli Ben Parat over at Baseball America said, his bold take is Nunez is going to be in the year as the Orioles closer, which is a super bold take. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have to make that decision about do we make that switch with Nunez or not, because that's a tough one.
And yeah, in that case, if he does end the year as the closer and he's that good at the end of games, yeah, it's going to be hard to move him off of that, especially because he's probably a guy that, like Bautista in 2023 or 2024, you're comfortable doing the 2-inning thing where he pitches a 9th, still tied. You can feel comfortable leaving him out there for the 10th with the runner on second. Yeah, but will he get Clay Holmes eventually? Maybe. But hey, let's just have him show out this year, and then we'll worry about that later.
Everything that Nick just said about Felix Bautista reminds me of why it is so hard to evaluate relievers and to figure out where you put them on this list, because you could put a reliever really high on the list because you're feel confident he's going to get to the majors. And you feel confident there might be one season there that is really good. But then all it takes is one or two injuries, and you don't really hear much from these guys anymore. And we hope with Felix Bautista we haven't seen the last of him in an Orioles uniform, or at least the last of the best Felix Bautista. But it is kind of daunting when you're staring down an elbow injury followed by a shoulder injury, which is the case with Bautista. But I think one thing that makes this list different this year is that we are leaning into more of those kind of players, and it reflects the direction the Orioles were going in by acquiring Nunez and Neighbors as a deadline last year, and then taking a guy like McDermott, who we're going to talk about in a minute, and realizing, all right, we've run our course with him as a starter, but there is a path for him to be a reliever in the big leagues, and that's what we're going to pursue. But before we get there, though, I want to throw out this question, which is, are either of you bought in on Reed Trimble? I wrote a piece about him over our Substack recently, and I got into what could be behind a breakout from Trimble this year. But one of the things that jumped out at me in that piece was only 114 games played from the time he was drafted through the 2024 season. He has not had a lot of stretches in his career where his walk strikeout numbers normalize. So we really still don't know in a typical season how much we can expect Reed Trimble to walk and how much we can expect him to strike out. So there's still a lot of unknowns about Trimble, but at the same time, we know the Orioles liked enough of what they saw last year to give him a 40-man roster spot when there were some other players, including Carter Baumler, in the mix that could have gotten that. And just to backtrack for a second, 226 games pro for Trimble since being drafted, which is a pretty small number considering that he's picked up in 2021.
I am kind of bought in on Trimble because, yes, health is the key, Vivek. He does need to stay healthy, but if he does, I do believe that he could be a very solid fourth outfielder. I know we have quite a few of those at the upper ends of the minors, Bradfield, Judd Fabian, Trimble, but I also think if there's an injury and he's forced to be a starter in left, center, right, more likely the corners, but he can play center definitely better than Dylan Beavers, in my opinion. I think he could be okay there. I mean, he doesn't crush the ball. He doesn't hit the ball extremely hard, but he does have a strong hard hit rate. He doesn't get caught stealing. He's going to go perfect his entire professional career without getting caught stealing. We know that. And he is elite at hitting the ball, pulled fly balls. He's elite at that. He's incredibly good at doing that, which is obviously a great skill, and that's how you get the most out of your power. And he already hits the ball hard, so I think he's going to be a great, what is it called? They call it a second division regular, but on a good Orioles team, I think that's just a very strong fourth outfielder eventually. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but if he can stay healthy, I think he can get there.
I just don't think a lot of people remember where he was picked in that 2021 draft. He was the 65th overall pick in the 2021 draft out of Southern Miss. So Orioles invested some pretty decent draft capital into him because they believed in his skill set. He was the guy a couple of years ago. One of my bold predictions was Reed Trimble finishes, or that year, I think it was 2024. Reed Trimble's a top 10 prospect by the end of the year, was one of my preseason predictions. It was another major injury, but yeah, that is the key thing. And like you said, it's nothing that's like, other than his pull air rates, which are fantastic. In his AAA data last year, like nothing like super stands out, but you're looking at that fourth outfield type, and I think we compared him a lot to Judd Fabian because it was, if you're going to protect one of these guys, I think a lot of people assumed it'd probably be Fabian. But when you look at Trimble, he plays all three outfield spots. He brings the speed, and it's smart speed. Like, not being caught once is a skill. It's not just raw speed. There's a lot of guys with raw speed that can't steal bases. Trimble does. But it's just solid. It's 68th percentile barrel rate. It was almost a 112 max EV in AAA last year. He makes solid contact. In zone contact rate was 57th percentile, so it's pretty decent. Whiff rate around 50th percentile. It's fine there. He's going to make good contact, and when he does make contact, he can do some damage on it. So he's going to be an interesting guy. It was definitely shocking, but it's good to see that despite all the injuries, and that was the reason why I had largely given up on him just because, like, how do you overcome? He's, 25, 26 now? How do you overcome those injuries? But he's also a switch hitter, too. Throw that in there as well. So I think he's going to make things interesting this year as long as he can stay on the field.
Also, shout out to him for persevering, honestly, and just sticking with it, grinding it out. I mean, that is a lot to go through. He went through so many injuries, and he stuck with it, and here he is. He's on the precipice. He's on the 40-man. Good for him.
Moving in now to the 31 to 40 range. This is a part of the list where I think you can see in a snapshot whose stock really rose last year compared to some guys whose stock might have dipped a little bit, but for various reasons we're still kind of optimistic about going into 2026. Andrew Tess, who had a remarkable debut season between the FCL and Delmarva, ranks 31st, followed by Zach Fruit, whose 2025 season unfortunately was really sidetracked by injuries. He ranks 32nd. Judd Fabian, great first half last year in Norfolk, some struggles in the second half after he came back from a wrist injury. He's down at 33. Chase McDermott, we just touched on him a minute ago, and we're going to have a longer conversation here in a moment. He comes in 34th. Vance Honeycutt, the Orioles' first-round pick in the 2024 draft. It's not worth beating a dead horse at this point to rehash his 2025, but it was not very good. He's now down at 35th on our list. Colin Yeaman, a 2024 draft pick, or 2025 draft pick, that the three of us like, comes in here at 36. He's followed by left-hander Carson Dorsey. Another shortstop in Cobb Hightower at 38. Brandon Butterworth, who was part of that Padres-Orioles deal at the deadline alongside neighbors Hightower, Bateman, and a few other prospects, is 39th. And he looks very good at Chesapeake after the deal last year. And then at number 40, a guy that we tabbed early in the 2025 season as a breakout candidate, that is hard-throwing left-hander Sebastian Gongora. Now, to this point, I've kind of started like the discussion with the top player down, but I'm going to switch that up here to go right to McDermott because we were just talking about him a moment ago. Struggled as a starter last year at Norfolk, moved to the bullpen, and looked pretty good late in the season for Norfolk, but then goes up to the majors, has a couple of really bad outings, ends up leaving the team because of a family emergency that I still don't believe we know the full extent of. So, all in all, 2025 was a really, really tough year for Chase McDermott. But as we talked about in a recent episode, and as was written about by an online website recently, McDermott has been working on some things this offseason, and the early results in spring training seem to show that, including good fastball velocity.
He's sitting 96.3 right now in his spring outings, which is awesome to see, with a 60% whiff rate. Small sample, but still, it's fun to look at small sample numbers. And I think that was what, back in December, he was already hitting 96 in that article that you found. And it was due to some small mechanical changes that they discovered in that private one-on-one training sessions. And he felt like it was an easy 96 compared to what he was throwing. And that was the eye-opener for me and something that I wanted to see. And we're seeing that velo 96 already here in spring training. I think, yeah, he warms up. He finds a groove. He finds himself in that bullpen. He's sitting a little bit higher. He's throwing some 99s. He's maybe even touching 100 like he said he wants to. So this is a big year. There's a lot. I know there was a lot of work on the mental side of the game as well that he admitted to this offseason. And that's going to be put to the test, I feel like, because this is probably his last chance in any role with the Orioles this year. So excited to see. But, I mean, he's over here throwing 96 plus with 19 inches of induced vertical break, getting the whiff numbers that he is. All of his pitches are working. His entire repertoire, 107 stuff plus in spring training right now. Couple of scoreless innings. It's a lot of fun to see. This is the call that we've been making for so long that we wanted to see. It's finally happened, and so far so good. We'll see what happens when the lights are brighter in a regular season game. And it's different staying hot every day during the regular season, ready to go in the game. But if the McDermott thing works out of the bullpen, like, speaking of another guy in this range, I don't want to see Zach Fruit start another baseball game. I want him on that same track, and I want to see if they could do the same thing with Zach Fruit in this role.
Absolutely. Bullpen demon season incoming for Chase McDermott. What a roller coaster ride for him over the past couple seasons, because coming into 2025, he was our number 4 overall prospect. Midseason, he was number 5, and now he's at number 34. So falling down, but if he is to be believed, if he can keep this up and tick up the velocity, like you said, be a real weapon out of the bullpen, all is forgiven. I would love to just see him settle in as a high leverage reliever, because the sweeper is a nasty, nasty pitch. We've talked about his fastball a lot. It doesn't grade out incredibly, and he does not command it the best, but it's high velocity. It's pretty good. I think it's a weapon that combines with all his other stuff. I might be back on the McDermott bandwagon already. 2 appearances into 2026 spring training.
One thing that I think has been a consistent part of our list is that the further into the list you get, the more our individual lists differ from each other. Usually the top 10, we will have the same 10 players, or will be close to the same 10, and even if someone who's on 2 top 10 lists falls outside the top 10 of another, they're not very far outside of it. But then when you start to get into the back half is where you see some big differences. And a few that jump out at me here, Nick had Colin Yeaman all the way up at 24th on his list. Andrew Tess was 22nd on Bob's. And all 3 of us were down on Vance Honeycutt. I think that's worth repeating. But I was the only one that kept him in the top 30, barely. I put him at 29th. So there was a kind of interesting range of outcomes here. And I want to start with Nick on Yeaman, because he's a player that we have not had a chance to really talk about a whole lot, even going back to the draft last year. What stood out to you about him to justify the top 25 spot on your personal list?
I just really like the kid. I watched him a lot when he was at UC Irvine last year, and to know that he's just the kind of kid I like to bet on. He went the JUCO route and suffered 2 shoulder injuries, didn't even get to play a lot in JUCO ball. And UC Irvine was one of the few, if only, school that gave him a call. And he led the team to the NCAA regionals last year. Hit 13 home runs, 80% contact rate, hard hit rate north of 50%, max EV north of 110. In college, I like it. It was a strong shortstop class last year. The Orioles grabbed a couple of them in Aloy and Yeaman. I just felt like Yeaman all year was kind of an underrated college bat. And so to get him there in the 4th round, I love that pick at the time, and I'm excited. I think I mentioned this. I might have done his top 50 episode. And I think I mentioned this. The numbers last year in his small sample after the draft, not great. But again, last year was his first full year he had played since high school. So the shoulder injuries knocked out his 2 years of JUCO ball. Last year was his first year. He goes through the regular season schedule, through the Big West playoffs, through the NCAA regionals, drafted, orientation in Sarasota. You get him up to Delmarva to play games again. I think he was just toast at that point. He needed a break, so I'm excited to see what he does to kick off 2026.
Yeah, I like Yeaman a lot. I didn't get to see him play as much in college, so I didn't have as much, and I'm not holding his Delmarva stint after the draft against him at all. I just basically am where I had him after the draft. That's where I kept him in. We'll see what he does this year. But Zach, guess where I had Vance Honeycutt on my top 50?
Nowhere. I know he was not on your list at all.
Might have to change that after his first 2 plate appearances in spring training. No, yeah, he didn't make my top 50, unfortunately. Would love a nice redemption arc and get him back moving in the right direction in 2026. But I guess I'll talk about Andrew Tess, who I was the highest on, 22. I just think that the skills behind the plate looked more advanced than I expected when I got to see him a little bit in Delmarva. And I love when players are able to improve during the season. I feel like I've said it before. Like, you'll see jumps from season to season, like a Darryl Hernandez, or I could give plenty of examples. But there's plenty of work to be done over the course of an off season. You come into the next year, Creed Williams refreshed and ready to go. Players like Samuel Basayo, and again, I'm not comparing Andrew Tess to Samuel Basayo, but players that can actively improve during a season while going through the grind, I put an emphasis on that, and I think Tess was able to do that. He struggled a lot, even though he was still taking walks and seeing a lot of pitches early in the year, especially in the FCL. he really turned it on and started to show more of his power potential as the season went on. Yeah, I like that about him. It's another thing I like about who's the other guy in this range as well. I got nothing, but that is what I like about Tess.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had Tess as my breakout pick for this season, and it's really unfortunate that the injury he had in Delmarva happened when it did, because he hadn't been up there that long before he got hurt, and I feel like there already is a little bit of buzz about him this offseason, but I feel like there would be even more if he had more runway in Delmarva at the end of the season. With Honeycutt, I knew that he was going to be in my top 50. I knew that he was probably going to be in the top 35. Where I really struggled and why he ended up in my top 30 is that when I looked at this section on the list, I just saw a lot of volatility. I saw Reed Trimble's injury history. I saw the injuries that Zach Fruit had last year. The fact that we still don't know what kept him out of Arizona, at least I don't think. I know we didn't know at the time we were doing our list. So it's like, all right, Honeycutt really struggled last year. He was bad, but there's some red flags with Fruit and with Trimble, who were just below him on my list. Cobb Hightower, who I had at 32, I think is going to be a really good player. I think that he's poised for a breakout, but when you look at the numbers last year, there just wasn't one thing that really jumped out at you. And what I kept coming back to with Honeycutt is if something can just click, especially the power, that's a good guy to have in the back end of your top 30. Yeah, it's not the first round pick, but if he could eventually develop into a power and defense-oriented fourth or fifth outfielder, you probably take it. I think you're still hoping for a lot more. You could still go back and say the Orioles made the wrong choice, even if that is the outcome. But it just feels like with Honeycutt, if he can just figure something out at the plate, whether it's making better contact more consistently or just somehow finding a way to get the power back, that it's going to turn around the stock on him a little bit.
I got to say, and with the caveat that, yeah, when you go 2 for 2 with 2 crushed home runs, the swing looks a little bit better. But results aside, I think this spring his swing looks way more under control and confident. I just seemed like he was flailing a lot last year with Aberdeen, and I didn't see that in obviously just the very, very, very limited sample size of his couple games that he's got in. But it made me more optimistic that maybe the changes that they were trying to make all season long last year are maybe going to pay some dividends in 2026.
So, first of all, everybody buried Vance Honeycutt. Y'all were done with him. You threw him away. You didn't want to see him anymore. You trashed him. He was a bust. And now everybody's back on board. Okay. No, look, it was incredibly frustrating. That's I've done my Vance Honeycutt rant where it's like you redo that draft 99 or 100 times. I make that pick 99 out of 100 times to go back. I think you can't go back and look at like MLB draft boards and be like, they should have done this, they should have done that. You don't know what that player would have done in this system or that system. The financial aspect, there's so much. It's just fun to go back and look at old draft boards, but I still make that pick because of that potential upside over and over again. I'm trying to look. If you're listening, you can go. It's Baseball Unstitched Twitter account. I don't know if they're on Blue Sky or other accounts, but I can't read through it and talk at the same time. It's a pretty long thread. They have a side by side, like a 10-tweet breakdown of Honeycutt swing. It's his UNC swing, an Aberdeen swing from last year, and then his spring training swings. So we can dive through that later on, or go find a tweet, look it up. I'm going to dive into it after the show a little bit more.
Share that on the Discord.
I'll share it to you. But there's definitely, like, they're pointing out there's some real changes made with the swing. So that's interesting. And yeah, the first home run was like an 87-mile-an-hour quote-unquote fastball down the middle. If he didn't connect on that pitch, you're done, dude. It's over. He mashed it. Maybe a little wind as well. I don't think there was a broadcast, but I think a lot of people in attendance were like, maybe some wind-aided home run as well. That one he hit today was a 94-mile-an-hour sinker coming low and in, and he turned on it. That was good. Even laying off 2 strikes, throwing him a slider low and away, he laid off that and got the walk in the untelevised game. That was good to see in the box score, at least. Yeah, it was so frustrating because no one knew what the hell the problem was with him. That's what made it so frustrating. Even he didn't seem to know what the problem was. But if he's going to turn a corner, it's going to be a lot of fun. But this whole range, as you guys have hinted at, it's bookended by, what's the list? So it's bookended by Andrew Tess and Sebastian Gongor. I agree. I love Tess. An 18-year-old catcher putting up the numbers that he did last year, a 141 WRC plus in the FCL as an 18-year-old catcher, that's super impressive. And the 18 stolen bases. Like, that's some sneaky speed there as well. FCL, bad catcher, I get it. Maybe it's juiced a little bit, but still, it's a sneaky aspect of his game there. And you've got Gongora, who is a potential breakout guy. He's one of the shortest left-handers on staff at, 6'5", but you don't have a lot of guys his size, 6'5" lefty, that can touch 98 miles an hour. He's sitting 93 to 95 now, and still struck out 29% of guys in between Delmarva and Aberdeen last year. So you got Tess and Gongor that book in this section that could be like real breakout guys in the system this year and move up incredibly. I think John Muley had Gongor as like a top 30 prospect over at Baseball America. But then you got this whole group here in the middle. It's like, I had a hard time as well. Like, what do I do with Honeycutt? I don't want to shoot him all the way down because first round pick, I want to give him another year, even though year one was a complete disaster and no one knew why. It was Fabian. How low do I drop Fabian? Because we've done the Judd Fabian discussion so many times. Chase McDermott, like, do I really believe he can improve if you move him to the bullpen? Do I really believe that or not? Where do I rank him? Zach Fruit, like, I agree with what Zach said. Like, we don't know his health status right now. I have no clue. And like, what if it's something more serious and he's out another year? And then do they convert him to a reliever, and can he find another gear as a reliever? It's just weird how this section ended up coming out, bookended by some younger, high upside guys, and then a lot of question marks, but question marks that could turn into some real impact, like Chase McDermott being a high profile reliever in the big leagues, Fabian potentially being a fourth outfield option, and Honeycutt reemerging as a prospect. You could debate about where he should be ranked later on if he does have a breakout, but just becoming a prospect again. This is if you're into like watching these guys on a nightly basis, like, this is where a lot of this intrigue, I think, is going to come from, because even Hightower and Butterworth was the massive EV gains last year, and it worked out. The numbers in Bowie weren't as good after he got traded, but I think there was some batted ball luck that did not go his way when he got to AA with the Orioles system. And the Hightower, if he turns it around, he becomes a fun prospect in the system. So, yeah, long rant, but this whole section is just, this is where, like, I thrive, where I love to, when I'm sitting down to watch the games at night or the next day, I love to watch these types of prospects and how they're performing, because who rises, who falls, we'll see.
Yeah, I'd call this section the breakouts and bounce back candidates. B&B. Vivek had a question about which 2024 draft pick could see a big breakout in 2026, just like we saw the 2023 guys have a breakout last year. And you brought up Gongora, and between him and Carson Dorsey in this range, I think those are your two best bets. And yeah, Carson Dorsey especially, I feel like he's got the stuff to be able to do it. It's about reining in that control, just like a lot of guys. And yeah, Gongora's got the stuff too. He's got some ridiculous pitches to go along with that left-handed frame, like you said.
Well, and you have to acknowledge, too, with Dorsey, he missed, about 2.5 months at the beginning of last season. And you could tell when he got back on the mound that he just didn't have it right away. But that's normal when a guy's coming back from an injury. I think he had like an inning or two after the draft in 2024, so really hadn't thrown much in the last year. You saw the command get better as the season went on, though, which was really encouraging to me. And before we move on to the final section of the list, I just want to throw out this question because it's relevant when we're considering Judd Fabian and Reed Trimble. Does the Orioles' decision to protect Trimble and not Fabian affect where you put them on your list? Not necessarily did you agree with what the Orioles did, but did the thought creep in your mind like, oh, maybe the organization doesn't like Judd Fabian as much as I thought, or maybe the organization still likes Judd Fabian, but they like Reed Trimble way more than I thought they did before they put him on the 40-man?
Not so much for me. it was just for me. The thing is Judd Fabian having first percentile end zone contact rate, second percentile whiff. Like that's going to be a lot to overcome. And we talked about, as you break it down, you look at his rolling average in a lot of those areas last year. It was definitely manageable for a lot of last year, but then tanked and just could not be recovered after the wrist injury. But for me, that was the thing. I just think Trimble, you bring in the switch hitting aspect, the speed, the defense as well. It's not Judd Fabian level, but it's still solid. He also makes good impact with the baseball. This is still a good profile. It's just been injuries that have kind of derailed him up to this point.
I still like him better than Ryan McKenna, if that says anything.
Yeah, I'll say for myself that with the question that I pose, I don't have a really consistent thought with it. I try to take it on a case-by-case basis. And even though if you look at my list and you saw Trimble 31st and Fabian 35th, I don't think that there's that big of a gap between those two guys. And really, like Nick said, it just kind of came down to both look like fourth outfielders, but there's real concerns about Fabian's hit tool, whereas I think what we saw from Trimble last year, it really just comes down to health. And if he stays healthy, he's got the makings of a solid reserve outfielder in the majors. And now I will move into the 41 to 50 range of this list. The players who are going to round out our top 50. We'll start at number 41 with Alex Pham. Pham missed most of last year with an injury, but came back late in the season and got his first taste of AAA late in 2025. He's followed by left-hander Andre Hidalgo at 42. Hidalgo was regarded by many national outlets as the best pitcher in the 2026 international free agent class. The Orioles were able to get him, and he settles into our top 50 immediately. He's followed by Luis Almeida, who had a healthy 2025 with some ups and downs. He comes in here at number 43. Outfielder Ariel Roque, another player signed as part of the January 2026 international free agent class, checks in at number 44. Peyton Neal, a utility player acquired from the Twins this offseason in exchange for Alex Jackson, makes our list at number 45, and you'll be seeing a lot of Eels in camp this spring. In fact, you probably already have seen him as he's in as a non-roster invitee. Yasmiel Boucher, who broke out with a pretty good run at Delmarva last year, comes in at 46, the catcher first baseman, looking like he's going to go to high A to start this year. He's followed by Damone Newell, who had a very good DSL season in 2025, a young infielder with a loud hit tool. Pat Riley, a right-hander with a high ceiling who unfortunately missed most of 2025 with Tommy John surgery. The three of us are optimistic that we'll see at least some of Riley this coming year, and he can tap into what looks like a pretty intriguing profile once he's back on the mound in 2026. He's followed by Kiefer Lord, a guy who himself is fresh off of Tommy John surgery. We saw him late last season with Delmarva, the hard-throwing right-hander, at number 49 on our list. And at number 50, Lisandro Sanchez, a young outfielder coming off his debut season in the Dominican Summer League. Now, this is where it's worth pointing out that you see a change from the original list. Wellington Aracena, right-handed pitcher, was ranked 17th when we finalized this list. Aracena, however, in a late offseason move, was part of a package of players that went to the Arizona Diamondbacks in exchange for utility player Blaze Alexander. And that allowed Sanchez, who was previously 51st on our list, so just outside the top 50, to move into the top 50. And I want to start here with Pham because, Bob, you've been pounding the table lately for Pham. I know in our Discord you've been talking about how even though we didn't see much of him last year, and even though I think all of us are still questioning why did the Orioles leave him in Double-A for so long when he had such a strong statistical case to get to Triple-A. Despite that, you liked what you saw late last season, and you felt that he deserved to be on this list.
Yeah, I just think, again, another super interesting relief option that the Stuff Plus numbers for his time in AAA at the end of the year were much higher than I expected them to be, just, from the eye test, and we don't get the StatCast data until they get to AAA, and it was a little eye-opening to me that maybe there's more here I don't think it's Anthony Nunez, Chase McDermott, Tyson Neighbors type of relief prospect, but just a nice 3 to 5 pitch mix of really solid pitches, and maybe more of the Cameron Weston type with more better raw stuff. It's not the same pitcher at all, but just the level of caliber of reliever I'm talking about, multiple innings. Could be like, I hate to compare anybody to Keegan Aiken, but a right-handed Keegan Aiken type where you're getting some low leverage inning or two here and there can be really solid middle relief. I just think I'm not giving up on Alex Pham just yet.
Yeah, the only thing that scares me was the amount of time he missed last year, and it was a forearm strain. So that scares me. I don't think we've seen him in a spring game yet. You figure he might get a little bit of run at some point. I don't know the current health status where he's at, but he did at least return last year. And yeah, like you said, the data, it was kind of eye-opening. He only sat 93, but again, that's coming off the forearm strain that caused, or inflammation. I don't know the exact wording, exactly what the injury was, but he missed most of the year with it. And he has more than 20 inches of induced vertical break, and like all of his offerings grading out pretty well. 100 plus, stuff plus, pretty much across the board. It's a fun mix. I like that comp. It's just the fact that this is a guy who did not start like ever outside of maybe 1 or 2 midweek games at the University of San Francisco or San Francisco University. Either way, San Francisco, he was a reliever, and we think, okay, this is just going to be a late round draft pick, relief arm. We'll see what he does. And I still remember it was like opening day when he was in high A. He got the start, and I'm like, okay, this is early season. They do this at the time. It's like they throw these guys out, get a couple of starts. They're the opener, but he's going to be a bullpen arm. No, he stayed in the rotation. He never left the rotation the last 3 years since then. It's been a fun rise. I'd love to see him get a shot in the big leagues here in Baltimore. It's just the injury just scares me going into 2026. But if he can stay healthy, yeah, just like Cameron Weston, even I think it's a little bit of a unique look, and so I think there could be something there where even if it's an up and down relief guy, you bring him up in the right situation, low leverage innings, can he be any help for you there?
Yeah, I agree. And it's been interesting with Pham's development because you kind of, what I'm starting to wonder is, was the strategy all along with Pham, okay, we see you as a bullpen arm, but if we stretch you out as a starter, we can broaden the pitch mix a little bit, perhaps make up for the fact that he never has been and probably never will be a premium velocity guy. For me, one of the big X factors in this part of the list, and sticking with pitching, is what we get from Riley and Lord going forward. Because Riley was a guy that I think was inside of our top 30 last season, comes over from the Pirates in the Billy Cook trade. And one of the things that I remember jumped out at me was that his first year in the Pirates system, he was at Greensboro, notoriously hitter-friendly ballpark, putting up really good strikeout numbers. It didn't look like he was getting punished at all by that environment. He looked good after he came over to the Orioles system. And I felt like, okay, he's going to open the following season in Double-A, and that could be a guy that gets Triple-A innings in the second half. But the injury happened so early in the year that unfortunately we didn't get much of a look at him. So in some ways, he remains a little bit of a question mark for the three of us, and I think that's why this spot on the list is appropriate for him, but I'm hoping that there's more in the tank when he comes back from the injury. And then with Lord, I mean, that still is a remarkable story, how he improved himself over the pandemic to go from a guy that was throwing in the upper 80s, low 90s, I believe, to high 90s fastball. And again, because of the timing of his Tommy John surgery, we have not seen a lot of him in the Orioles organization. But in the little bit that we saw last year, the command clearly was behind. But the fastball, when you look at the outings he had, looks pretty good. So I feel like the stuff was showing signs of coming back. And if he can just stay healthy this year, that's going to do a lot for his development.
Yeah, Lord is going to be a fascinating case and a test on the reliever ability of the organization, the direction they could be going with making some high leverage relievers as prospects instead of going starter, okay, switch to bullpen. Because I think you let him loose in a bullpen starting straight out of the gates this year, he could be a very quick riser. His stuff is pretty phenomenal as long as it's maintained over the course of all the injuries and the surgery. So I think he could be another potential bullpen demon down the line. Or do they want to stretch him out and slow play it a little bit? That'll be interesting to see. And yeah, Pat Riley, another guy that I think, just like Braxton Bragg, if he had a full season last year, obviously he had much less of a season to show us what he was able to do. But another guy that would probably be like a top 15 prospect and knocking on the door of the major leagues and contesting, maybe not with Gibson and Erman and LDL, Luis De Leon for best pitching prospect in the organization, but in the next tier of mix with the Levi Wells, Boston Bateman, etc. So yeah, I hope Riley can get back as soon as possible and fully recovered and back to what he was doing. Would love to see him get another shot. And again, another guy that maybe with the switch to relief second half of this year, maybe that's something a direction they could go in. But yeah, very interesting guys who still have a pretty high upside, but just injuries have kind of cut short the percentage that those upsides get hit.
Yeah, with Riley too. I remember after the trade, like the Orioles were pretty stoked to get Riley at that deadline, because that was the same deadline where they traded away Seth Johnson and Moises Chase. Like, they got rid of some pitching prospects at there, and they were able to use Billy Cook, who, look, I think we all enjoyed watching Billy Cook play. I always felt like he was such like a weird, in a good way, like unique player. It's like he's this tall, he's got some power, he's got some juice in the bat, but he plays second base, first base, right field, left field. You put him in center field, you need to. He played all over the field. But you look at, like, was there a path for him here in Baltimore? I know Buck Britton was a huge fan of his when he was in AAA, but still, like, you didn't really see a path for Billy Cook here in Baltimore. And you kick that Rule 5 decision down the road a little bit and bring in a pitching prospect that the Orioles really liked and were excited about. It was a good way to replenish the farm at the time. And it's unfortunate his injury happened, but I hope we see him back at the end of the year, and be interested to see what we see when he's back on the mound. But Kiefer Lord, I'd almost say, like, he's a third-round draft pick in, 2023? Yeah, 2023 third-round draft pick. He has less than 10 innings at Delmarva up to this point. I would almost just, like, slow play it. Be like, if you got to spend 3/4 of the year in Delmarva, that's where you're going to go. We don't know. We haven't gotten the dump of minor league injuries, who gets put on the 60-day IL, who's on the full day or the full season IL. So we don't know what pitching injuries look like down on the farm, but we know it right now. It's going to be pretty stacked, obviously. It should be pretty easy to keep him down in Delmarva, bring him up at high A, bring him up to Frederick for the last 2 months or so of the season, and you just leave him open to the Rule 5. And you say, nobody's going to take this guy. He's got limited run in high A. He missed 2 years. They're not going to take him. And you get another year with Kiefer Lord in the system as a starter. Hopefully that's how it ends up playing out. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how they deploy him at the start of the year. Because he's also going to be limited. He's not throwing, 60, 70 innings this year. So another way they could keep him under the radar a little bit more from the Rule 5.
Before I wrap up here and get into the final question that I have for you guys, is there any other players in this 41 to 50 range that you want to shout out for a moment or talk about a little bit more?
I'd say Jamon Newell. He is probably one of those guys I was talking about when we were discussing Steven Martinez, where he repeated the DSL and is, I don't know, maybe the same age as Martinez, but I still like his potential with the improvements that he made year to year there. That's why he's down at the bottom of the top 50 and not in the 20 range. But I still like the tools. He has a sweet swing, switch hitter, can play defense, steals a ton of bases. I think he's got a pretty good chance to be at least a Frederick Bencosme type of infield prospect in the system, and hopefully he can reach another level that Bencosme has yet to do.
This is me also trying to talk myself into it a little bit more in throwing this name out there, but I'll throw out Luis Almeida's name just because I want to give him one more shot. It's tough. He multiple shoulder injuries. I think he had one to each shoulder. He had an ankle injury There might have been one or two other injuries as well since then, but you gave this kid $2.3 million as a 16-year-old. He's still only 19 years old, and he'll be back in Delmarva. I know we've talked recently about the defense. I know I've said he just looks like he doesn't know what is going on. Like there's just nothing going on up there between the ears when he's playing defense at times. But that could just be his face, his facial expression. And so can't fault him for that. But still, skills-wise, it's like, where does he fit in defensively? I don't know at this point, honestly. That's a tough call. But with the bat, to worry about the defense later and just focus on the bat, can we see anything there? He makes contact with the ball. He just hasn't shown any of that power, but that could be he's still a young kid. With his injury history, maybe we start to see a little bit more power this year when he's back in Delmarva. I don't know. I'm not completely giving up on Almeida, but he is a guy that I will be paying close attention to when I'm watching Delmarva at night.
Yeah, Almeida was my pick for bounce back candidate on a recent episode. I do think that when you look at the underlying data, there were some encouraging signs of the bat, but it's all going to come down to the health with him and getting better defensively, whatever position that he's going to end up settling in at. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to stick at shortstop. You just kind of hope that he lands somewhere on the left side of the infield or he ends up being a really good second baseman. And now I'll go into one of the questions that I like to ask at the end of every Top 50 episode. And there's really two layers to this. One of them is the best of the rest, which I think we'll save for next week because there are 7 players that got votes in the top 50, and I'm sure that the three of us want to spend some time on the guys that we had on our individual list that didn't make it. But real quick, I'll run some of the names down. Eber Cartaya, Tanner Smith, both right-handed pitchers. Cartaya currently a starter. Smith looks like a pure relief prospect. Were on individual top 50s, but did not make the overall top 50. Same with infielders Jose Pena, Griffo Farrell, and Elvin Garcia. Infielder-outfielder Elvis Cuevas was also on an individual top 50, but did not make the overall list. And then outfielder Cam Lee, a 2025 draft pick, also missed the top 50, but did get a vote. And now I'll go into my last question here, which is, who's the one guy that you really wanted to include on your top 50 that in the end you just couldn't find the room for? And Nick, I'll start with you here.
Let me pull this up real quick. I think I know my pick. I will just say, as I'm looking this up, there are some guys that you didn't even mention there and the extra outside the top 50 and guys that we didn't even talk about in our regular top 50 that it's not hard for us to spend 10, 15 minutes going into detail on a couple of other players of guys that could be like, honestly, if things break right within the next year, could be like top 30 prospects in the system. I'm thinking like a Jaden Loray. Who the heck is he going to be as a player? You mentioned Cam Lee. I think Cam Lee has a really exciting ceiling. There are a lot of pitchers down there in the lower lows of the minors as well. So this is definitely going to be interesting to see like who we're not even talking about yet that breaks out. But now that I got it loaded here, my pick is
Cameron Foster also had some pretty good data in spring training.
Unbelievable outing he had there. I'm going to go with Elvin Garcia. He was in my top 50 actually, but he didn't make our overall top 50, so I guess that doesn't fully answer the question, or at least in the correct way there, but he didn't make our final top 50, so I should have pushed him higher to get him in there. I don't know. I didn't know until, honestly, it was probably right before we made our list, and this was back in December when we put our initial list together. So I don't think I realized until right after that he had the injuries last year, but this is a guy who signed for $500,000 in the 2024 international signing class. He was a DSL All-Star. Ben Badler was tagging him as potentially the best shortstop prospect ever signed out of the Dominican Republic by the Orioles. Not a terribly high bar there, but still. The numbers were pretty dreadful in 2025, but then I think, what was it, a hand injury? I think it was John Mioli who told us about that when he was on, but I think it was a hand injury that heavily impacted his season. So if he could be a guy who rebounds from that injury and starts to flash what made him such a high-profile prospect early on, I think Fangraphs has him like a top 5 prospect in the system last year. I don't think he's ever going to be that, but yeah, if he can become a prospect of note in Delmarva this year with a healthy hand, we'll see.
Since this seems to be the year of the relief pitcher, I will go with Yaki Rivera, who I think I have number 52 on my personal list. And yeah, he struck out 30% of batters at Double-A in his age 21 season. It's pretty impressive. I think he's got some really filthy stuff. If he could just get that walk rate to 10% or less, I think we're talking about another potentially very exciting relief pitcher. And that just seems to be the theme of the 2026 minor league Orioles. So, yeah, I guess that's my answer.
I'll be honest that the last 5 spots were one of the hardest parts of the list for me because I had a pretty long list of players that I thought were worthy of being in the mix. Griff O'Farrell was not in my personal top 50, but you can make a case that based on his floor, he should be in the overall top 50. I looked at Andy Fabian, a guy that I've talked about for the last 2 years as someone that I really like. The velo uptick that we saw last year when he moved to the bullpen, if he's able to sustain that and keep piling up the ground balls the way he does, he could be a really interesting left-handed relief prospect. I agree with you, Bob, about Rivera, but the guy that I was really close to putting on my list that ultimately I just didn't find the room for is Cameron Foster. And what it comes down to for me with Foster is that it just looks like the ideal reliever's pitch mix. Fastball that runs in the mid-upper 90s. He works in a splitter. He's got a slider. He's going to probably be a one-inning weapon in the major leagues at his peak. But there's a good pitch mix there. In the end, what basically happened was that I was down to one spot, and it was between him and Tanner Smith. And I gave the nod to Smith because he's a few years younger than Foster is. Foster's going to turn 27 here in a few weeks. And I kind of liked the command improvements we saw from him after the trade last year, but Foster was really, really close for me. And, truth be told, when Samuel Basallo and Dylan Beavers graduate within the first few weeks of the year, barring anything unforeseen, Cameron Foster's going to slide right into my personal top 50.
And that is a great reason to still sign up to become a patron of Orioles on the Verge, because first update of the season, we're going to have 2 brand new spots open. And like we said, there's a lot of variance here. Could be a lot of changes come May 1st.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great reason to become a patron. Not only do you get that, but you will also get weekly updates during the regular season from Bob, Nick, and myself. Access to patron-only channels in our Discord, which are very active. A lot of fun discussions in there about the Orioles. Baseball as a whole. There's even a parenting advice section. I don't remember when that got in there, but it is in there, and it is pretty active. So be sure to sign up to become a patron today. It's $3, $5, and $10 levels to have access to all of those perks. We will be back next week, probably talking a little bit of best of the rest, expanding on this list a little bit, as well as breaking down what's going on in spring training. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. For Bob Phil and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side, your Sleep Number setting. Enjoy personalized comfort for better sleep night after night. And now, during our President's Day sale, take 50% off our limited edition bed, plus an extra $100 off all mattresses. And Saturday. Only at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.